November 1st, 2010, as written.
This is for first reading, will you add that? Or we,
Yeah, why don't we, yeah, just,
Sure. Whatever you want me to write?
yes, just,
what do you have as a, what's your motion?
we'll approve the
Go
final,
back to the beer and wine
we'll
license.
approve the final document on the 15th.
So as a first reading, so the executive summary dated as November 1st, 2010 is a first reading.
Yes.
Yep.
Second.
Motion by Mike, seconded by Sean. Delaney, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Town
Greg, do you
administrators
have a version for us to
report.
sign? If not, we can use one of the ones I printed.
That's the first reading. What do we,
We're not gonna sign it.
2 weeks? Yeah.
I'll sign off on the document, I add those things
Yep.
that were suggested.
Good.
All set?
Yes, sir?
Please refer to the administrator's report that's in the packet. I start off with item number 2. You've already talked about the first. The town clerk has reported that the town is now compliant with all aspects of the open meeting law. You'll recall there were changes that went into effect on October 1st. The clerk will be incorporating meeting notices and agendas into the 24/7 availability on the town's website and the meeting calendar, and there'll be no additional cost to the town. You recall one of the original iterations of the open meeting law said that we had to provide public access, a physical copy 24/7. The Secretary of State's office not the Attorney General's office has since softened their position, as you know, and says we can post it electronically. The good news is we're compliant. That's the good news for that issue.
So we were posting at the police
We were,
station?
there was a
We're gonna
brief
stop
period of
doing that?
time that we were doing that, yes.
So anyone that's got used to going over to the police station will no longer find the posting.
Yeah, I think the book is probably hasn't got many fingerprints.
But the thing
on
is,
it
they
at
can
this
go
point.
to, if they can make it during normal library hours and go to the library, check it on the website.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. Number 3 is, deals with the 2011 tax classification hearing. As you know, it is the time of year where the board has to approve the classification. And many people think that the board is approving the tax rate, but merely what you're doing is approving the classification of property. Just some issues that are going on right now. The hearing is necessary prior to setting of the tax rate. Setting of the tax rate is a function of the Board of Assessors, the Board of Selectmen, and the final player is the Department of Revenue. The revaluation of property was completed, as you know, was submitted to the Department of Revenue about 2 weeks ago for certification. Assuming that the values are approved by the Department of Revenue, the assessors have scheduled a public disclosure period, which is an opportunity for all taxpayers to come in and review their preliminary values. That will take place from November 4th to 10th. The law mandates that there be a minimum 5-day disclosure period, and that has to take place before the tax classification hearing. So as you see, the calendar is ambitious, no less so than usual at this time of year. Thinking it out further, the actual tax bills need to be mailed no later than the end of December. That's a legal requirement. They then are due and payable February 1st. So the bills that residents will be receiving about the first of the year will be their actual bills based upon the new valuations and the new tax rate that does get approved. Everything to this point has been done in a preliminary fashion. So would ask whether the board is okay with having the hearing on November 15th. Any questions about that?
I would just suggest, for the benefit of a new member, that, and I know the assessors have done a pretty good job of explaining various aspects of the decisions that we have to make.
Yep.
We make sure they're prepared to do that.
Absolutely. They'll be forward and they'll present that information to the board at the hearing.
Yes, Michael.
So Greg, you said the revaluation of all the properties have been done.
Right.
Is there a summary that highlights whether it's on average gone up? Has it gone down across the town? Is there something like that already written?
Yeah, that'll be presented at the tax classification hearing.
Okay, that's what, okay.
So what that'll show is the change in total valuation across the whole community. But individual residents who wish to ascertain their property values, the Board of Assessors asked me to indicate that during the public disclosure period, that's an opportunity for everyone to come in and look at their individual properties.
So is that some information we'll get the night of, or are we gonna get it prior to?
No, you'll get a package prior to the meeting on the 15th, which will have all of the details in there. Typically, what's done is the Board of Assessors will look at an average valued property in town. Let's just say for purposes of average value, that could be $400,000. And what they'll do is look at the change in the tax rate and calculate out what that is. One of the major issues that the board needs to decide is whether it wishes to have a single rate or a dual rate, which, that's really the function of that hearing, is to hear out the issue, whether it's a single rate or a dual rate that the board would adopt.
Yes, but there are other options
There's
for
other
how you
issues.
can adopt, and that's why I asked that a presentation be made on that.
Thank you.
If there's nothing further on tax classification, just as a note, the Water Commission is reviewing proposals which have been submitted for review of the water rate structure and recommendations with new rates that will go into effect next year. There are a total of 2 proposals that have been received. The intent of the study is to examine and recommend rates over the next 5 years. So this would not necessarily be a one-shot deal. I have a copy of the RFP. I wasn't able to attach it. It wouldn't print, so I didn't have any luck with it. But as you know, the water fund has had an issue in the past with not collecting on the revenues. There are a number of reasons for that. The reasons have to do with the economy. They have to do with our rate structure. And seasonal issues related to either too much water or too little water. Seems like we don't necessarily have an average year. But again, the intent here is to have the water commissioners, with their knowledge, go and look at those proposals and get back with a recommendation so that we can proceed forthwith with having the study and the recommendation presented to the board when you consider the water rates and the capital improvement plan after the first of the year.
What are we, water rates after the first of the year?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact timing on that.
Is that, do we normally do it?
I thought it was in December.
I thought it was December, yeah.
And our,
We'll look at the calendar.
and our contract is up at the end of March?
Yes, it is.
I guess I don't have a problem with it, flowing into January, but,
Flowing into the January.
flowing into January, right.
Yeah, but that was good.
I mean, given the fact that it really has to be looked at in depth
Right.
because of, the growing deficit associated with the, I call it the weather, I guess, but, clearly the rate structure itself needs to be adjusted. And I'm not talking about just a rate, but, the low-end users, that low-end middle range, I think needs to be adjusted accordingly to assure that we have enough water revenue to support the overhead and water production in a year when we don't consume, not our average year, but the low-end year. Plus, since we've borrowed money out of the Water Stabilization Fund that we created to,
We've actually had a couple of pretty good examples of what can happen to us
Right.
over the last 2-3 years.
2 years in a
Yeah,
row.
Yeah,
Right.
so, and they're
One
two
year-
two very different things.
one year lots of rain, no one used water. Second time, not enough rain, and we shut the wells off, shut the supply off. So, anyway, I think that, rather than rush it, I'd prefer that a real thorough study be done
Right.
before it's presented to us.
My recollection was there've been instances in the past where the boards held the hearing, but not voted actually on setting the rates until a later date. Obviously, it makes some sense that as long as the study is ongoing, it doesn't make sense to set the rates until it's completed.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Delaney?
When do you anticipate getting a recommendation from the Water Commission and the DPW?
Selectman
If I may,
Newell is gonna
If I may, yeah. They are meeting on the 16th. Everyone has a copy of the 2 proposals, so everyone's reading it, and then we're gonna discuss it on the 16th, and we should know on that date.
Thank you.
next.
We're definitely not gonna be doing it in December.
Can we afford to wait until the 16th?
What?
Can we afford to wait? I mean, is it something we can,
I mean, the winter water usage isn't gonna,
no, I'm just more concerned that we're getting closer to that March timeline, and, no, we'll just leave it at that.
anything else?
Not on water, but I do want to update a couple of other things. You recall there was a vote at town meeting approving an economic feasibility study. The purpose of the study was to look at the economic impacts resulting from water and wastewater expansion along Main Street and Concord Streets. CPC indicates that the consultant responses are due about November 22nd, and then there'll be an evaluation committee which needs to be appointed to review and rate the proposals. That's a requirement under the law. So people say, well, why can't you just make a decision? You can't, because the law says you can't. The law says you have to go through this whole analysis with an independent committee. The committee has to rate and rank each proposal, assign a numerical rating to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, the good news is, expect that the committee will be meeting beginning of December 1st, and they'll forward a recommendation for contract award, and I'll proceed with that contract award forthwith. So I think it's moving along at a fairly ambitious pace. And again, this is data and documentation that's needed in support of efforts related to wastewater and water expansion, which again is one of the strategic goals identified by the board.
Who's on the evaluation team?
It would be internally staffed right now. It would be CPC, DPW, and myself would be the representatives. Next on my list is just an informational update. I've been informed that the police department has been awarded funding for replacement of 22 ballistic vests through a federal grant program. The program will ensure the continued protection of our officers, and Chief Nolan reports that the department is also intending to apply for a second round grant to continue to replace additional vests at no cost under the grant program, which is a great idea and a great program. I think in the past, most cities and towns had appropriated money from local funds for ballistic vests. And the time that I've been here, it's nice to see that there are federal grants that now are available, and departments take advantage of that to the extent that they're available. Compliment the police. And then, before I get into number 7, there's a couple of other things that came in that didn't make it onto the list. Police department reports that they have continued monitoring commercial vehicles along Chestnut and New Streets. And during the month of September, there were 3 commercial vehicle violations that were noted: unregistered vehicle, overweight vehicle, and not being properly marked. So the Mass State Police is still continuing their monitoring of vehicles in that neighborhood. And I wanted to at least let them know that there have been some violations, not to the severity of the first time through, but there is some activity up there still. And then, also been told that the school department is, we're ready to proceed with the feasibility study agreement, and I know that the board sometimes hears reports from Selectman Delaney, who's on the committee, but the feasibility study agreement was forwarded to town council, who's approved it to legal form, and issued his letter of opinion, so that document is ready to be signed by the committee, and the feasibility study hopefully is ready to embark very shortly.
Does that have to be signed by the building committee, or both the school committee and just you? Me, okay.
Council's ruled that I'm the one who signs it. And then there is some training that is coming up with those of us who are have sign-off authority on that project, and that'll be taking place on November 12th in Boston, a half-day program for members of the committee and myself to become acquainted with the process, mandatory program that we have to go
You aware of that?
I'm informed that tomorrow is the date for the hearing at Middlesex Superior Court on the Teamsters lawsuit versus the town on the Quimbill. So just be apprised of the fact that that